All right, that should have made you a co-host. Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I see it on the participant panel too. So I'll hang here and as soon as I'll start hearing beeps in about 5 minutes. I'm sure I'll start letting people in.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Jim, feel free to let anybody in as if I don't see them right away.
That's spoiled.
It's supposed to rain the next 8 days in a row. So
Yeah.
or all of the next 8 days.
Of course, on the weekend. Of course,
Third weekend in a row.
yes. Stinks.
Just Saturday morning though, right?
Saturday afternoon looked worse than Saturday.
Yeah, I think so.
Really?
I
Saturday.
think Saturday is the worst day of the next couple.
Oh, really?
Not a washout, but the
All
most.
right, you guys are not talking about
Right.
it.
We should just all not go on the work.
Right. Doesn't want to take a nap on Saturday afternoon.
Hey, Dave, it looks like this is already recording. Do I just timestamp it to the clock?
You can pause the recording now till we start. Actually, no, if it's 9:30, I guess we can, yeah, we can timestamp just the start.
Okay.
You know, we can, I didn't know it was recording.
Yeah, at this point, I don't know if we want to pause it just to start up in another minute.
Okay, yeah, true.
Now I've got all the meeting process. YouTube viewers are gonna hear all about the beach bus.
In the
Boogie
rain.
boarding.
Yeah, boogie boarding.
Don't think we have a quorum yet.
We do not have a quorum. In person.
Five. Do we need three more, Adam?
Yep.
All right, but it is that hour.
Yeah. So we will call the meeting to order. You want to start with going around the room and doing our roll call? Start over there.
Yeah, I'm Angelique Penoff, Director of Transportation at Easter Seals.
Lucy St. John.
Ben Herbert, Regional Mobility Manager.
If everyone could speak up too, so that people at home can hear us.
Zach Swick with the commission.
Nate Miller with the commission.
David Tilton with the commission.
Butch Laker with Manchester Planning.
Tracy Whitehead with MTA Clark.
Adam Lasney with the commission.
And Sylvia Von Aulock with the commission.
And I am Maggie Baldwin with the City of Manchester DPW.
Jim, why don't you start us off?
James Veo with the commission.
Caroline?
Hello, Caroline Wilson, Town of Derry Planning.
And Alex?
Alex Hawk, just a resident of Manchester.
Thank you. And Mac?
Mac Bevere, NHDES.
And Kristen?
Kristen Clark, City of Manchester, DPW.
Okay. So review of the minutes from April 17th, 2025. Well, we can't
We
do
can't take
anything,
action.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we'll just move on to new business. And the first thing on the agenda is a Safe Streets for All SS4 action plan by Adam.
Can everyone see that at home? All right. So good morning, everyone. I'm gonna go over the Safe Streets for All Safety Action Plan today. This was presented, a short version of this was presented at our April MPO meeting. This is gonna be information only today, but we expect the MPO to adopt the plan at their May meeting. So the SS4A grant program, for those who might not be familiar, part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. 5 billion was allocated total over the 5-year period from 2022 to 2026. In FY 2024, 710 communities received over 1.2 billion, and 2.9 billion has been awarded since the inception of the program. There are 2 types of funding under this grant: planning and implementation. And Rockingham Planning Commission got a planning grant back in 2023 to produce or to hire a consultant to produce the safety action plan for the 4 MPOs in New Hampshire, which are listed here. And as a reminder, what are the 4 MPOs in New Hampshire? We have Stratford in the green, Rockingham in the yellow, Nashua in the orange, and of course, us in the red. So what is a safety action plan? Basically, it's a strategic roadmap to enhance safety in a given area. It identifies risks and outlines mitigation measures, gathering a lot of data, assessing hazards, especially crash data that you'll see in a few minutes here. Incorporates stakeholder input. There's quite a bit of that in the plan. Detailing actionable steps and roles and responsibilities. And of course, it uses the FHWA safe system approach, which you can see here is a holistic approach, takes human vulnerability into account to better plan for safe roadways. And the goal of the plan, reduce the number of fatalities and serious injuries by 50% by 2035, working towards 0 by 2050. Shown another way, this is a visual from FHWA, 4 main parts to the plan: identifying stakeholders, using safety data, choosing proven solutions, and then implementing those solutions. So the plan had significant outreach involved with it, starting with a survey done by VHB back in June and July of last year, almost a year ago now. This was a 17-question survey that was responded to by just over 1,000 participants, of which about a quarter were in our region, which makes sense for one of the 4 regions. Over 1,700 markers were placed on an interactive map where survey takers could comment on safety issues that they found most important. You can see here about half of them were motor vehicle safety issues, a quarter pedestrian, and about 19% bicyclist. The top safety concerns out of many that popped up over and over again: distracted and erratic driving. 74% mentioned speeding, and 72% aggressive driving. If you've driven in the last 5 years, you can attest to all of those. Some key takeaways from the survey. This is a map showing where some of the worst issues were reported in motor vehicle category. Clustered in Manchester, as you might expect, but also we did have 11 of our 14 towns, folks from those 11 towns participate. Some of the most notable things that were mentioned: dangerous intersections, speeding, traffic signals synchronization, and better signage. This is very high level on all of these. This is the pedestrian input. Folks wanted more crosswalks, better winter maintenance of existing infrastructure, better lighting, and then better enforcement of existing traffic laws. Cyclist input, they wanted more protected bike lanes, traffic calming measures, signage, education, enforcement, and better integration with transit. See here, less incidents or less geographic spots pointed out, but still a decent variety from our communities. And then other input, this kind of overlaps the other categories, but this is a miscellaneous category. Street lighting was mentioned again. Secure bike parking, something that non-cyclists might not think about much. Crosswalk signage, expansion of transit routes, traffic signal adjustments was mentioned a lot, and then speed control and enforcement. So after the survey, VHB did a focus group here at the TAC meeting back in August that some of you might remember, soliciting input on most dangerous areas in our region and things like that. And then in September, there was a meeting with the Manchester Environmental Justice Advisory Group that included an alderwoman, Conservation Law Foundation, and an SNHPC staff member. And this was to get input from some of the underserved areas right here in Manchester. A few of their comments basically aligned with what was seen in the survey, but inadequate lighting, especially on sidewalks and crosswalks, poor or inadequate crosswalks on Beach and Maple, pet signals that had worn down indicators or were lacking indicators, and then gaps in the bicycle networks. The one that comes to mind is the Beach and Maple bike lanes. There were also 2 vulnerable road user focus groups done on Zoom, one for cyclists and one for motorcyclists back in January. So it was a robust outreach effort is the takeaway from all this. VHB also reviewed relevant plans at both the state and regional level. Won't read through all of these, but safety plans, bike ped, as well as transit-oriented development, complete streets, making sure that they culled as much data from those as they could. And then we're on to critical emphasis areas. So these are factors strongly associated with fatal and serious injury crashes throughout New Hampshire, as mentioned in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. You can see some of the list of critical emphasis areas here ranges from everything from intersections to older drivers, teen drivers, distracted and impaired driving, vulnerable roadway users, motorcyclists, speed and aggressive driving, and one of the biggest ones, vehicle occupant protection. So seatbelts, safety restraints, things like that you'll see these come up later in the plan. So the data analysis was kind of the meat and potatoes of this plan. VHB used data from 2018 to 2022. For the non-fatal data, they took it from the DMV Crash Records Management System. And for fatal data came from the federal FARS, Fatality Analysis Reporting System. So during that time in our region, there were 99 fatal crashes, 467 serious injury crashes, and just over 4,000 minor injury crashes. The focus of the report was on fatal and serious injuries, but the minor injury crashes were added to increase the sample size and make it a more robust analysis. Another diagram from the report is non-fatal speed and aggressive driving crashes by year. So across the bottom, you can see the 4 MPO areas. This is SNHPC on the left, Stratford, Rockingham, and Nashua. And the columns represent 2018 through 2022. See the pandemic, these type of crashes fell. And then they rose again slightly in our region, but not so much in the other regions. I think we're probably see them rising in the years since this analysis. So this chart is crash severity by emphasis area. So what we're seeing here is the emphasis areas we just went over down the left side, intersections, roadway departure, etc. And across the top, we have types of crashes, starting at fatal and going down to minor injury, possible injury, and property damage only. This column is the percentage of emphasis area resulting in a fatal, serious injury, or minor injury. And then this is the percentage of total injuries in this emphasis area. It's a little bit hard to explain here. And then here are the total crashes. So you might be wondering, what if there's a distracted driving incident at an intersection? Those two overlap. That's what this next table is for, called the cross matrix analysis. And again, the critical emphasis areas are listed down the left and across the top. And the numbers in the middle of this chart is basically how much 2 given areas overlap. So for instance, speeding is the 5th one over here, follow it down. Occupant protection, so if someone wasn't wearing their seatbelt and they were speeding, those 2 emphasis areas overlapped in 33% of crashes. As you can see, occupant protection overlapped most with a lot of these things. So this red line here. Some of these other ones are a moderate degree of overlap. So for instance, impaired driving and roadway departure. Those overlapped in 27% of incidents. Another one notable down here, motorcycles and mopeds and speeding. It's another combination that resulted 21% of the time. So the next part of the report was the high injury network, which is a small subset of roads where a high proportion of fatal, serious, and minor injury crashes occur. So the top 50 high injury network roads represented 5% of the roadway network, but 34% of crashes. So 1,477 of 4,300 crashes occurred on these 50 roadways shown here. 25 of them were within a transportation disadvantaged census tract. I tried to blow this up, but the quality was just too poor, so I just left it alone. But basically right in the center of Manchester, including Union, Maple, Lake, and South Main Streets. And 52% of all high injury network crashes happened in these disadvantaged areas. So the next part was the census data overrepresentation analysis. And this showed census tracts with higher proportions of minorities, persons with a disability, age 65 plus, those living in poverty, zero vehicle households, and limited English proficiency. These areas are identified on this map in the crosshatch pattern. Most of them are right here in Manchester, but there are census tracts with higher rates of these populations in the outskirts of our region as well. You can see in the northern part of Ware, Francistown, out in Deerfield, and over here in Derry, Londonderry. And the reason for identifying these was so that countermeasures can be addressed to the unique needs of these populations. So, for instance, bicycle and transit safety in areas with fewer drivers in the center of Manchester. Here's another chart showing this is 65 plus population. The SNHPC average rate is 15%. So these gray areas in our region are higher than that. So having an older population, a greater percentage of folks over 65. Again, Francistown, Deerfield, Candia, parts of the southeastern part of our region, as well as Goffstown and Manchester.
42% in Goffstown.
In this part of Goffstown.
Oh, that must be like a home or.
The Metville.
Oh, yeah,
area, maybe.
yeah.
It's where the Hillsborough County retired or nursing homes.
Okay. So the next part was safety countermeasures, and these are defined as strategies effective in reducing roadway fatalities or serious injuries. So there are actually 28 safety countermeasures. This is a screenshot of about half of them. They range from appropriate speed limits, speed safety cameras, variable speed limits, to bike lanes, crosswalk visibility enhancements, walkways, road diets, roadway departure, and there are even more categories that didn't fit on the screen, but this is an example. These countermeasures were chosen to address safety issues prioritized on the various road classes. So principal arterials and minor arterials were by far the highest percentage of crashes by type of road, followed by collector roads at 15% and local roads at 8%. And interstates, freeways, and expressways were excluded from this analysis. So a few real life examples. This first one is on Front Street in the northern part of Manchester, running from I-293 up to Riverbank Road at the Hooksett town line. This is a 2-lane principal arterial with short residential setbacks. Most people in the room probably know this as the home of Walmart, the Bass Pro Shops, and many 55 plus communities. So given the qualities of this road, the recommended countermeasures were centerline and edge rumble strips, roadside design improvements at curves. You can see it's fairly curvy. wider edge lines, and appropriate speed limits for all users. And that was a principal arterial. So the next one is a residential connector, High Range Road in Londonderry from Nashua Road to Litchfield Road. It's a 4.6 mile stretch, narrow lanes with edge lines, no shoulder, and fixed objects near the road. If any of you have been to Sunnycrest Farm in Londonderry, you might recognize the screenshot. And if you go in the fall when there's events going on, this is totally filled up, parking on both sides in these dirt lots. And there are curves and hills on both sides of the farm. So they recommended a rectangular rapid flashing beacon and an enhanced crosswalk at this spot, as well as enhanced delineation for horizontal curves, center line and edge rumble strips, and wider edge lines. And the third example is a local road. It's Elm Street right here in Manchester, the northern part from Webster up to Bennington Road. This is a local road, single family residential with large setbacks and overbuilt street width. In places, this is a 60-foot wide road with just two marked lanes plus parking. So they recommend a road diet, high visibility crosswalk enhancements, improved lighting, speed feedback signs, and the RRFB, same as the last location.
Hey, could you go back 2 slides? So what's the northern end of that?
It's Riverbank Road.
I'm not sure where that is, but yeah, that is oh, okay. Thank you.
So the strategy tables, these are a couple examples of tables organized by emphasis area. This one here is countermeasures to reduce speeding and speed-related crashes. So in the second column here are the actions, set appropriate speed limits based on the use of appropriate engineering practices, following across a proposed lead agency and partners, activity performance metric, application, land use context, safe system element, potential funding sources, and a crash modification factor, rating, priority, and a time frame. So again, there are these tables for every emphasis area. I just chose a couple examples. This one is countermeasures to reduce vulnerable user crashes. So some of the actions include prioritizing pedestrian and trail crossing improvements, improving road geometry, implementing lighting improvements, and installing pedestrian hybrid beacons. So coordination and evaluation. As the years pass, the intent is to analyze how this process has worked, progress in each of the areas I just mentioned, and evaluating the outcomes of new crash data as it comes in each year, using fatalities and injuries as benchmarks to see what the effectiveness is of the countermeasures they recommended. Public reporting. The plan recommends a regional safety plan committee, which would gather and provide feedback on this over the next few years. That could also take the form of a TAC subcommittee, which we can discuss later. Reviewing crash statistics as they come out, assessing the implementation status of actions, reprioritizing actions as time goes on, identifying potential funding, and then of course coordinating with DOT and ensuring safety priorities align with those of DOT. Public education, keeping the public informed, of course, is always a priority. Public meetings, keeping things posted on our website, social media updates, announcing upcoming events, any meetings related to safety or specific projects in our region to ensure those get posted. And then, of course, periodic surveys to gauge awareness and make sure we're getting the latest feedback from folks in our region. The intent is for this to be a living document, to undergo continuous review, and to be comprehensively updated every 5 years. SNHPC will take the responsibility to update the plan, and as I said, integrating public engagement into these updates. So the next steps, as I mentioned at the beginning, the MPO is expected to adopt this plan at their next meeting in a couple weeks. Implementation grants are available right now. Municipalities may apply directly. This is directly from the NOFO from FHWA. If the MPO action plan's boundaries cover the applicant's jurisdiction, the activities are coordinated with the MPO, and the proposed safety projects and strategies have been ID'd as priorities in the action plan. So link here for more info, and the deadline is June 26th. I think that's all I had. That's a lot of information, so thanks for listening.
Sorry, what is a road diet?
Basically making sure the roads are adapted to the needs of a community. So if it's complete streets, narrowing, yeah, painting lines.
It can mean a lot of things.
Okay.
It just
Reevaluating.
typically it's restricting the vehicle flow, and to instead of like 4 lanes, it might go down to 2, 3 or 2 lanes, and it's being more aware of all users. I'm wondering, since you talk about available funding right now, is that realistic? Do we have any idea on how realistic? And I don't know if our communities might be interested in doing a joint application, or if Manchester's thinking about it, but I'm just wondering if, you know, you talked about a subcommittee there, and I mean, a lot of really interesting data here, and a good strategies. I'm just wondering what might be the next steps so that this truly is a living document. Any thoughts?
This is the implementation funding is a discretionary program.
Right.
There's a no vote out right now for that. Manchester is considering options, for, interestingly on road diets. I think there is some language now in the current NOFO that is less supportive of road diets than perhaps in years past. So it may be that road diet type projects don't score as well moving forward, at least through 2028. But yes, I know Manchester is considering options right now for what they may potentially apply for through this NOFO. So getting, it is a threshold to have the action plan posted, and complete for the region. And so by doing so, which it now is, it makes any of the municipalities in the region potentially eligible for implementation items.
I just wonder if we would encourage having like a work session for TAC members just specifically on creating an application. I mean, we saw lighting in crosswalks. I mean, something really simple that should not trigger some crazy problems. I'm just thinking, I'm obviously a lot of good information, and I don't know if we have Hooksett and Derry in the room and Manchester. I'm just wondering if it would make sense to tackle this in a workshop session. I don't know.
I mean, I think a good approach too would be just be reaching out to any of the communities in the region, more of the municipal highway staff, public works directors, and things like that, because they're more in tune with just the whole general network of the community. There might be places that maybe want to try for it. It's just a suggestion.
Have we, what has been your outreach to this sort of final report? Has it gone out to all the public works?
I have not done any outreach because we just received the report a couple of days ago. So it's a blank slate for if we want to do it.
Well, I think Lucy's right. I mean, sending that out to all the DPWs and planners in the region, that's probably a good next step. I'm sure that was probably on your agenda anyway. But any other thoughts from our communities on how we might assist moving forward?
So Manchester did submit a request through our CIP committee to apply for the grant to develop what we're calling a multimodal transportation safety plan. So kind of looking at what came out of the safety action plan and the network, the multimodal network. You know, we wanted to include bikes, peds, access to transit. We did want to include reference to lighting because we get a lot of complaints about lighting. So we tried to make it broad. It has to go through CIP and then it has to go through the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So we're hoping we'll get support. But that was where we kind of landed on this. We've been kind of stalking the release of the safety action plan.
Yeah.
So we could move on it and make a decision as soon as we knew it was out there.
Well, that's great to know that you've gone to the next steps already.
Well, we have the whole process that we have to do to even apply for it, right? So
Right, for a grant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bruce, how about Hooksett?
I'd like to see them. I think it's probably way beyond the scope of this, but can't really get to Manchester to Hooksett on your bicycle without risking your life. And it'd be nice to get, Route 3A. It's a beautiful. It's a beautiful roadway along the river.
Yes.
3, not so much, but if you could get, it seems like Manchester had gone south, east, and west, and now it's time to go north. There's no way to go north. So that would be a place to start. It's a huge project.
Yeah.
We'd probably invite thing Route 3A. I don't think when I looked at that slide, I was thinking it was Route 3A, but it's fun streets.
Right.
Good invite Route 3A, that would be good. So kind of bike lane, sidewalks would be nice too. It's close to the river, one side, close to some cases hillsides or whatever on the other side. So it'd be a challenging project, but definitely, I think it's kind of needed.
Yes. Any thoughts, Caroline, for Derry?
Hi. So I think everything that everyone's been saying so far really makes sense. But in my novice and inexperience, I will defer to Elizabeth. I'll have a conversation with her after the meeting and we will get back to you.
Okay. And I'm sure staff, if it's of interest, certainly we can send you the recording of this presentation, but it may be that we could even go on the road if your town council was interested. All right.
So I think a key point with any grant opportunity that different ones come up over time is, as you're developing plans or you're developing different ideas for improvements to whatever part of the network, documenting that and then is that work for your local process on how you have to go to the board selectmen or city council before you can submit an application, having all those other pieces of the puzzle if you're developing ideas and putting things in plans, having those in place and then sharing that information when a new grant comes available. We don't, grant for the future, but this is certainly one that the application deadline is coming up. So
right.
It may not be good for everybody, but it sounds like Manchester's already done some of that, homework ahead of time.
Are only communities allowed to go for the grant, or can RPCs or the state go for grants under this?
I think MPOs are eligible.
It's in the number.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So I'm just wondering if the stakeholder group that did it with the RPCs have talked about a follow-up grant at all?
We haven't, and, you know,
Or was
we
this?
did this, I think, for the good of the municipalities.
Right.
To open the door for this funding. But we had to, you know, look under the couch cushions to match this effort. You know, there, you know, each of the four MPOs, you know, pooled funds to contribute to match to even get this far.
Right.
You know, for the good of the municipalities.
So
to
you think
open-
this
to
is
open the
it?
door. I don't know where match would come from for
Sure.
anything, you know, significant.
Moving on.
At the MPO level beyond getting the action plan complete, which we now have, which basically, you know, opens the door to municipalities to apply for implementation funding.
All right, well, I think for our region, our next best step is to sort of package this and get it out for all our communities and so there's a spotlight on this.
Two questions related to the action plan itself. So this is an application process, but so from your data that I saw, the 2018 numbers for the region were double rate of any other year. And that was 2018 to 2019, so that I don't think that would be COVID drop. So do we know why?
I just asked Zach about that this morning.
Yeah, I think that's as far as we can figure out, we think it's just noise. Like somehow there was some reporting anomaly because it's not in any of our other years, it's not in any of the other regions.
Yeah.
And that's what VHB said as well. As far as we can figure out, we don't have any real theory beyond it just being an error.
Yeah, because I mean, that's double.
Yeah.
What it is for every other region, for every other year, including this one, so.
That was a new year with a new reporting system. So maybe, you know, could be that Manchester, for whatever reason, had, you know, struggled that first year. We really don't know.
And then, my other question was with the overrepresentation analysis. So I think that's really interesting data to have. One question I did have was, I guess, was that correlation and causation? So one of the questions I had as a follow-up to that was whether or not were there higher rates of like pedestrian and bike accidents in the area, because the ones that the streets that you have listed up there were in South Willow that I know are already traffic areas in the city anyway. So I wonder, like, was that analysis part of like just a correlation that being higher traffic to streets, or was there a causation?
That's a good question. I don't really have a good answer for you.
I don't think there was any analysis based on, you know, total traffic, you know, whether to account for BMT or, you know, pedestrian usage or anything like that. That was because, frankly, well, we could do it for BMT, but we don't have it for pedestrian usage. That was and the high entry network was identified in a statewide plan that then VHB just adopted. You know, didn't do any additional analysis on it.
Yeah, I was just wondering if, like, generally for the high entry networks, if that was just because of capacity, because it looked like a lot of those were.
Some of it would be, but I think even if you dug into it, there would still be disparity of some sort. It wouldn't be 100%, but it would be significant.
All right. Thanks, Adam. So the next thing on the agenda is the overview of the TIP amendment number 1.
Oh, I know you've all been waiting for this.
Yay.
Exciting.
I'll read this out.
So I've got about, I don't know, 85 slides or so to walk through about TIP amendment number 1. So No, actually, tip amendment number one is actually fairly brief and straightforward. So I will hit the highlights over the next few minutes. I showed this slide at the beginning of anytime we're talking about the tip, we are talking about the projects that are programmed in the next 4 years. These are the projects that are farthest along in the project development process. They're the closest to construction. They're based on the first 4 years of the 10-year plan, but they get updated much more often than the 10-year plan does. The tip is much more of a fluid document. And so the first 4 years that we are talking about now in this context are 2025 to 2028. So this is the first amendment of our newly adopted 2025 to 2028 tip. You're seeing a sneak preview today. We know what the project changes are going to be in tip amendment number one, so we're letting you know all of that. But we have not released tip amendment number one. We will on or about Monday, June 9th. We'll hold a 10-day public comment period that will run until June 20th. And we will hold a public hearing at our June MPO meeting to consider adoption of tip amendment number one. So you're getting a sneak preview today of everything that will be in tip amendment number one, but we haven't actually released it yet. What is in tip amendment number one? Most of what's in it is statewide programs, changes to statewide programs. There are very few, there's one change of significance to a local project, but most of what's in tip amendment number one is statewide programs. The first is for resurfacing of tier 3 and 4 roadways. The New Hampshire DOT a few years back created a tiered system for classifying their roads. It's different than federal functional classification, and it is also different than class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, the legislative classifications. So tier 3 and tier 4 here are not the same as a class 3 or class 4 road from a legislative classification, or functional class 3 or functional class 4 road. This is a New Hampshire specific classification, and they do have a statewide program to resurface tier 3 and tier 4 roadways. Most of the time, you don't see this in the tip. So because it's largely funded historically through betterment funds. Betterment funds are state funds, and state funded programs generally don't have to be included in the tip unless they involve a regionally significant capacity expansion. So it wasn't in our originally adopted tip. However, some of the roads here are Fed aid eligible, and the state is adding federal surface transportation block grant funding to this resurfacing program, both for fiscal 25 and 26. The inclusion of those federal dollars means that we now have to show it and carry it in our tip. So that's why it's appearing here as a new project. It's not a new project, but it's a new project in our tip because it's federal funds are being added to it. There is a statewide, what they call a 4R project, and I forget what the 4 R's are: rehabilitation, reconstruction, and anyway, there are 4 R's. They call it 4R. Used to hear that a lot more back in the safety loot era than you do now, but you still see references, and there is this statewide 4R project. It is called Pavement Rehabilitation and Reconstruction on National Highway System Roads. And National Highway System roads in general are interstate and principal arterial roads. And so this is a state managed effort to do rehabilitation and reconstruction on certain portions of the National Highway System in New Hampshire based on where they're at in terms of their project development schedule. They are shifting the PE and right-of-way funding for fiscal years 27 and 28 beyond the tip horizon entirely, but they are retaining fiscal 26 PE and right-of-way funding. So they see the need to spend PE and right-of-way funding in fiscal 26, but not necessarily in 27 and 28, where that project stands right now. There is a new project being added to the TIP. It is the statewide ADCMS project, Planning, Training, and Implementation of Advanced Digital Construction Management Systems. That is a mouthful. It is a new project in the TIP. It was a discretionary award. It was announced in December. It's a federal discretionary award. The federal government is promoting and pushing these advanced digital construction management system efforts. New Hampshire DOT was a successful applicant for those funds. And so that project is moving forward, and those funds are programmed in fiscal 25 now. What is an advanced digital construction management system? Good question. I'm not an expert in this. I know in general it is about reducing paper. So to the extent possible where cloud computing and apps can be used in the field for construction purposes to verify quantities and do all of the sort of, day-to-day construction management work without having lots of paper that needs to be processed. So the idea here is that by implementing digital systems, the construction management process can be streamlined and economies of scale can be realized in the long term. That's about what I know about what an ADCMS is or New Hampshire's efforts on that front. There is a statewide project 44536. It is a sort of a catch-all project for underwater bridge inspection efforts around the state. Most of the time, this is encompassed in a program called the UBI program. This particular project is going to be individually listed, so it's kind of appearing in the TIP as a standalone project for the first time. It's being broken out of that statewide UBI program because there is some non-participating funding that's coming into. So sometimes efforts like this statewide have certain elements of those efforts that are federally funded for federally eligible purpose, and certain parts of those efforts are funded through other funds that are not federal, that are called non-participating funds for non-Fed aid eligible purposes. So they, and when those two different pots of funding get combined, we break those out and list them separately. And so this is an example of that. There's some non-participating funding coming into the mix in addition to the federal funding to support underwater bridge inspection efforts. So this is kind of inside baseball and probably boring, but that's why it's getting split out and listed individually. So again, it's not a new project, but it's newly going to be listed individually in the TIP for that reason. The only local one that's seeing any sort of change is where this is a very old project number, 14338. This project goes back a long time. It is seen a couple of iterations. Right now, it is the River Road Bridge reconstruction or replacement over the Piscataquag River. It is moving forward. DOT and the town of Ware are working closely on this effort. Additional construction phase funding is needed, and there's some shifting of engineering right away and a portion of the construction costs from fiscal 26 to 27. So this is seeing an increase in overall funding to accommodate the current cost estimate of the bridge replacement and the current schedule of the bridge replacement. There are some scope only changes, and some of these, are pretty minor, but so these are projects where nothing is changing in the timing or the funding source, but there is some tweak being made to the scope. The first one of these is the FTA 5307 program. This is the state managed FTA 5307 funding. If you're not familiar, this is Federal Transit Administration 5307 funding. 5307 funding is urbanized area transit funding. And what the state manages is the Boston urbanized area for 5307 funding. So if you ever see this code, FTA 5307, in this context, it is for DOT programs projects in the Boston urbanized area for those funds. The proposed scope now reads operating capital, preventative maintenance, capital, ADA, and administration for NHDOT program projects. What's not listed here due to space constraints is, a benefiting the Boston urbanized area, but they do use as an example Boston Express. That is one of the, historically Boston Express capital and operating costs for their routes to Boston from the southern part of New Hampshire have been historically supported by this 5307 program. Once upon a time, the Capital Corridor rail project development phase was also supported by these 5307 funds. FTA 5310 funds, these are the state, these are the 5310 formula funds that come to the state as a whole. 5310 is the FTA program that is for elderly and disabled transportation services. The proposed scope now reads capital, mobility management, and contracted services for seniors and individuals with disabilities. It used to read operating. The state actually doesn't really directly fund operating with their 5310 funds. They have a structure where they pass those 5310 funds through regional coordinating councils, and the regional coordinating councils purchase service from their subrecipient providers. We are the lead agency for the Region 8 Coordinating Council. So so kind of the way it's structured, DOT actually purchases services from the regional coordinating councils and their subrecipients. They don't directly, again, inside baseball, a little, that's why it says contracted services here rather than operating. And then the MTA 5310 funding, this is the 5310 funding that MTA gets directly via the Nashua urbanized area as a large urban area for CART purposes. And so the proposed scope now reads capital, operating, administration, and mobility management for CARTs, senior and individuals with disabilities services. Again, it's a rewording, but not any significant change there in the intent or purpose of those funds. With that, that's amendment number 1. Again, lots of sort of in the weeds, inside baseball type of changes here. Any questions on amendment number 1? You'll see it in your packets for the next meeting. You'll have another opportunity to ask questions if you don't have any today. Hearing none, I'll move on. Everybody can wake up now.
All right, next on the agenda is Region 8 RCC ridership update by Ben Herbert.
So my name is Ben Herbert. I am the Regional Mobility Manager for the Southern New Hampshire region, aka Region 8. And I'll be giving everyone a sort of update and snapshot, a macro level snapshot of the ridership throughout the Southern New Hampshire region. This kind of touches on what Nate was talking about 5 minutes ago with the regional coordinating councils. I work for the commission, but I'm a representative of the Region 8 Coordinating Council, which is a similar region to Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission's region. The main difference is that we do not have the town of Francistown within our RCC, and we actually have a couple towns that are part of the Rockingham Planning Commission that are within our RCC. But this is the map of our region and the 20 towns that are part of Region 8. Just to go away. Here we go. Just to compare Region 8 to the other regions throughout the state, we are the most populated region, of course, since we house the city of Manchester, as well as towns of Derry, Salem, Londonderry, Goffstown, Bedford, all the populated suburban towns of Manchester, and all the populated towns throughout I-93. We also have the highest population of individuals who have disability or adults with disabilities and or older adults at almost 80,000 individuals that are older or disabled. And And we have a couple of transportation services in our region that are specifically tailored towards the older and disabled population. These services are a part of the FTA 5310 program that Nate was just talking about with all the inside baseball and the district. I'm not going to get into that, don't worry. But we have MTA's regional shuttles. These are the shuttles that operate in Goffstown, New Boston, and Hooksett. They provided a little over 2,100 trips in calendar year 2024. There is the Caregivers, which is a volunteer driver program based here in Manchester. They provided almost 2,400 trips. There's Meals on Wheels of Rockingham County. They serve, as said, Rockingham County, except for the municipalities that are on like the western edge, so like Londonderry, Derry, those communities. Those are served by CART, which we'll see in a second, and they provided about 2,900 trips. Easter Seals, New Hampshire is based here in Manchester and serves the city as well as the towns of Hooksett, Goffstown, and Bedford. They provided 3,200 trips in 2024. The town of Atkinson is a part of the Region 8 RCC, and they have their own in-house call demand service. And they provided about 3,600 trips in calendar year 2024, just to their local population of older adults and people with disabilities. Then there's the MTA Step Saver. This is the ADA required paratransit service operating here in the city of Manchester, as well as in areas of Hooksett, Goffstown, and Bedford, providing about 7,500 trips. And then CART provided the most, I guess you could say, call demand trips in 2024, at least from the providers that gave us data. They provided over 11,300 trips throughout their region, which includes the SNHPC communities of Derry, Londonderry, and Chester, as well as the RPC communities of Salem and Hampstead. And I said I call demand services, but usually there's an asterisk with that label next to the Step Saver, since it's a paratransit service. And New Hampshire tends to differentiate volunteer driver programs like the Caregivers from call demand services. But for the sake of this next slide, if we were to loop those in together with demand response, this is what our region looks, this is what our region looks like compared to other places throughout the country. So we had over 33,000 call demand trips in 2024. That's a little above the cities of Topeka, Kansas, Duluth, Minnesota, and Fort Collins, Colorado, and just a bit under cities of Arlington, Texas, Tallahassee, Florida, and Charleston, South Carolina. And these 7 services cover 18 out of the 20 municipalities in the Region 8 RCC area. They serve 93.4% of the region's older and disabled population. And as I said, they provided over 33,200 one-way trips in 2024. And then, of course, there's other providers that I didn't get data from, but I figured it's worth giving a mention to. We are served by other volunteer driver programs, such as the Greater Salem Caregivers and the Future Insight, which is a statewide program that assists people with vision impairment, community caregivers of Greater Derry, Ready Rides, which is based actually in the Seacoast region, but just expanded into the town of Deerfield. And then the town of Sandown, which is an RPC community, but also in the RCC, they run their own in-house volunteer driver program. I think it's based out of their police department. They have one staff member who's just the dispatcher and ride coordinator, but they have a fleet of volunteers that service the town of Sandown. And then Meals on Wheels of Hillsborough County is based here in Manchester. And then there's the town of Wyndham's senior van. I think that's based out of their recreation department, assisting the seniors within their community as well. So there's a lot of services tailored toward the needs of those with disabilities and those of older age in the Southern New Hampshire region. And so this data was collected. This data is from, as mentioned, the Atkinson Elder Services Program, the Caregivers, Easter Seals, New Hampshire, Manchester Transit Authority, specifically rides from their regional shuttles and their Step Saver, and CART, as well as Meals on Wheels of Rockingham County. And the trips tell us what town they were picked up in, where specifically were they picked up at, as well as their drop-off town and drop-off location, and then the purpose of that trip. And every town, not every town, every provider defines trip purpose differently. So I sort of took them all and squished them down into, what's the word? Consolidated. That's a more professional word. Consolidated down into.
Very down.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Squeeze them down into 8 different categories. So medical purposes, so seeing the doctor, the dentist, getting your eyes checked up, dialysis, chemo, all sorts of that stuff, as well as trips to the pharmacy. Shopping, I categorize this as grocery shopping because that's how all the other providers did it. Employment, rides to work, self-explanatory, social and recreation, so rides to the senior center for activities, visiting family, volunteering, going to adult daycare, which I wasn't sure if that was the best way to classify that. Didn't sure if that was recreation or medical, but now if it's right that way, then I'll leave it, but that can easily be changed. And then, of course, going to the library as well. Personal needs and errands, so people have to go to the bank or DMV or anywhere else. Food, excluding grocery shopping, a lot of these services will provide rides to either food pantries or to conglomerate meal sites like Meals on Wheels does. So I figured it was important to exclude that from just shopping. And then education, people go into either school or daycare, and then any other trips that couldn't be defined. And so the trips that I analyzed in this were one-way trips that did not have a residential destination. So trips that were taking people to the store, the hospital, any sort of mixed use area, post office, churches, or banks were trips that were considered. Trips that took people back to their homes, their assisted living facilities, or their apartment building were not included, because the way that trips were reported, it would say if someone lives in, let's say like Auburn, for example, and they took a trip to Manchester to go to the Dartmouth-Hitchcock Hospital, that would be a medical trip. And then when they take a return trip, so when they go from the hospital back to Auburn, that would also be classified as a medical trip. So then all of a sudden you would have 200 medical trips to Auburn. And you'd be thinking, where's this major hospital in Auburn? There is none. But if it were to be reported like that, then it would kind of give a misleading report of how people move around. So that's why it's focused on one-way trips to non-residential destinations. And so I'm going to go through the SNHPC communities, showing where people in each community are traveling to. So the town of Bedford, majority of people in Bedford are traveling to either Bedford or within Bedford itself or in Manchester, as well as a handful of trips going down to Nashua, Hooksett, and Derry. Candia actually has 20, this was the, so when I did this PowerPoint, I only included the towns that had at least 12 trips all year coming outside of it. So at least like 1 trip per month. So the town of Deerfield, and I want to say Chester's on here, Deerfield and like 1 other town in Auburn had like less than 12 trips outside of it that were reported on this. So they're not in this presentation, but they will be in the forthcoming report that we'll be seeing later this month. But Candia had 26 trips coming from outside of it. Majority of those go into Manchester, as well as a handful go into Exeter, Hooksett, and Raymond. Chester had 103 trips, with almost every single trip going down to Londonderry, as well as a handful going to Manchester and Salem. Derry had over 2,600 trips, with majority going to either Londonderry or within Derry, as well as 8% going down or going over to Hampstead, 4% to Salem, and then 12 to Manchester. Goffstown had 914 trips. People in Goffstown, it's actually a pretty good distribution here, but just about half the people in Goffstown were going over to Manchester, and then about 200 trips for Goffstown and Bedford, for each for Goffstown and Bedford, and then a handful of trips up to Concord, up to Hooksett, and down to Merrimack. Hooksett had 715 trips, with the majority of them going to Manchester, as well as within Hooksett, as well as a handful of trips going up to Concord, Goffstown, and Bedford. You're seeing a sort of trend here where people are going, and I'll go more into that once I get through the rest of these towns. Londonderry had 1,700 trips, majority of them staying within Londonderry, a good bit of them going over to Derry, and then a handful going to Salem and Manchester. Manchester had 6,200 trips. A vast majority of them were actually just within Manchester, but it was, that's right, I can't highlight in presentation mode. The vast majority staying within Manchester, and I could say 8% going to Bedford, but it's also 521 trips going to Bedford. So while it's only 8%, that's still a lot of people traveling to Bedford. Over 450 trips up to Hooksett, 379 over the Goffstown, and then a handful of trips down to Derry, Londonderry, Merrimack, and then a handful of trips up to Concord. New Boston had 216 trips. These were all from the MTA New Boston shuttle, with majority of them going over to Manchester, as well as a handful going over to Bedford and Goffstown. And yeah, those are all the communities I had to highlight there. And so when we look at the most common town destinations in SNHPC communities, it's basically Manchester, Derry, Londonderry, Hooksett, Bedford, and Goffstown. And when we take this and we look at the most common trip purpose for going to these towns, for Manchester, 56% of trips into the city were for medical purposes. For Londonderry, 26.4% of trips there were for shopping purposes. That's the same for Bedford at 52.7%, Goffstown at 54.2%, and Hooksett at 58.8%. And then the largest share of trips in Derry were for employment purposes at 32.4%. And then just to show what the second place trip purpose for each town was, you'll see that it's still either medical, shopping, or employment purposes. So the second place for employment is the case for Londonderry, Manchester, and Hooksett. Medical being the second most common purpose is an example for Bedford and Goffstown. And then in Derry, shopping is the second most common trip purpose. So there were 448 different specific destinations that all these services brought people to in 2024. These 5 points make up almost a quarter of all those trips. This would be the Vic Geary Center down in Plastow with over 644 drop-offs to it. This center is where the Rockingham Meals on Wheels program brings seniors to their luncheon events. So people in Plastow, or people going to Plastow from all over the southern Rockingham County area. The Silverthorne Adult Daycare and Nursing Home in Salem had a lot of people traveling there at 659 drop-offs. And then the South Willow Street shopping area had 816 drop-offs. There's a couple places within this analysis where whenever there are a bunch of different drop-offs in like the consolidated area, I just kind of like loop up. I'll just use the word again, like smush them all in like one single point. Is that what I said? Smush, squeeze, squish.
Consolidate,
I'll
squish.
use every word except consolidate from now on. But so it made sense to, put them all in like one single category. In this case, the South Willow Street shopping area at 816 drop-offs. The second place, so to say, is the Garden Lane Plaza and Woodmont Commons in Londonderry at 984 drop-offs, almost 1,000. And then the most common drop-off spot in the region was the Brady Sullivan Tower in Manchester at just over 1,000 drop-offs. And this is most likely because of the dialysis center that's located within that building. And so when we add on these 11 points, now these 16 destinations make up almost half of all drop-offs within the region and outside the region. I'm not going to go up to 448, by the way. I'm stopping after 16, but just to go through these, this includes the Walmart and Market Basket in Hooksett at 629, the Londonderry Senior Center at 512, the Hannafords and Goffstown at 454, the Market Basket in Bedford at 431, the downtown Derry area at 423. I know it's kind of cheating putting downtown Derry this high up because a lot of people are probably going there just returning home. But since downtown Derry has a lot of mixed use development, you can't really pinpoint if people are going there, returning home, or going shopping there as well. So it just made more sense to include downtown Derry in this analysis. The Hanover Street Plaza in Manchester, I think its official name is the East Side Plaza, but this has both the Hannaford's grocery store as well as a dialysis center inside of it as well. So that's why there's so many trips going there. Yeah, the South Plaistow shopping area has a Walmart and Market Basket, and I just learned like a week ago that the Merrimack Valley Transit Association has a bus stop there. So there's a fixed route bus stop in Plaistow connected to the service down in Massachusetts. The Walmart in Derry had 343 drop-offs. The Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center in Manchester had 329 drop-offs, as well as the DaVita Dairy Dialysis Center in Londonderry. That's a heck of a tongue twister, DaVita Dairy Dialysis. And then downtown Manchester, like the greater Elm Street area, if you want to call it that, had 328 drop-offs. And so there's a couple of reasons why I think this report is important. You can use these numbers to identify and strategize ways to address gaps in service throughout the region. For example, you didn't really see much happening out of the towns of Ware and Deerfield, because those two towns were historically lacked access to transportation services. But actually, over the past year, the RCC has worked with various stakeholders to bring transportation to those towns. So as I mentioned, the service of Ready Rides expanded westward to include the town of Deerfield, and that started in October of last year. And then starting in July of this year, the volunteer driver program of Community Volunteer Transportation Company is expanding eastward out the southwest region to pick up the town of Ware, as well as the town of New Boston. We can also use this to build partnerships with organizations that people utilize for transportation. So any sort of medical centers that a lot of people are getting rides to, you could use this data to find a way to bring them to the table and work with us one-on-one to build this coordinated network of transportation. And then you can also use it to explore potential opportunities to implement efficient transportation services. And so the one example I have is this stretch in Derry and Londonderry. I'm referring to this area of Nashua Road between Mammoth Road and then right in the middle of downtown Derry, as well as this stretch of Rockingham Road / Manchester Road / Crystal Avenue / Birch Street. That's why I didn't label it, because can't fit that. But throughout this area, there was the drop-offs that we saw earlier. So the Garden Lane Plaza and Woodmont Commons is along this. Downtown Derry is along this, as well as the DaVita Dairy Dialysis Center is along this. But other locations that aren't in this PowerPoint, but will be on the report that had significant traffic includes the Elliott Urgent Care, as well as the Parkland Medical Center, and then all sorts of various shopping centers all throughout this route. All this together had a total of 2,584 drop-offs, which is 15% of all drop-offs throughout all trips that were analyzed in this report. And I was going somewhere with that, but I forget. But so what you could do with this is that, touching on Adam's Safe Streets for All presentation earlier, you could use this and look at this and talk about opportunities for better like road infrastructure. So bike lanes, pedestrian infrastructure, knowing where all the foot traffic is, and create better modes of connections. You can look at this and figure out better ways to implement transportation service that's more efficient and can help more people with a better use of resources. All this being done in a 3.2 plus 2.4, 5.6 stretch of road. And that's just an example of what you can do with this. And there's plenty of other locations throughout this report that has a similar trend like this, but this is just an example I wanted to highlight of what you can do with these numbers. As I mentioned, there's a more detailed version of this report coming soon. I'd say about to mid-June, hopefully before that, if not the end of June. So you'll be seeing more about the towns people travel to. So like, for example, here's the town of Bedford. It's showing where people are traveling from to get to Bedford. The chart here shows like what providers are providing each trip. So you can see just what provider is serving what community. And then, of course, it breaks down the trip purpose even more. So it's not just the two that you saw earlier, but also highlights personal needs, social and recreation, all sorts of stuff as well. And that, I thank you everyone for listening to that, and I yield the floor.
Question?
You have one quick question. The visits, did you say that was monthly or yearly?
The visits?
Yes, like the bus pickups.
It was for 2024.
It's 2024, so this is the annual, yeah.
Gotcha, okay.
Might want to stop sharing. Can see everyone. Fabulous presentation.
All right, so any other business?
Yep, I have one. Hi, David Tilden with the commission. I just wanted to take a moment to inform the TAC about an upcoming event that will be hosted in the Mill Yard regarding biofabrication industry in southern New Hampshire. The Regen Valley Tech Hub and Next Gen Manchester Resiliency Council will be hosting an event where they'll be convening key municipal and industry stakeholders to discuss progress that's been made within the biofabrication industry and upcoming opportunities. This event will be held on Friday, May 23rd, between 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at 150 Dow Street in Manchester. If you would like additional information about Regen Valley Tech Hub, we have flyers that can be found right by the table on the door to the stairwell. And information about the event itself can be found in SNHPC's main media blast. Thank you.
Anything else?
We do have an update over here at DES. So, as you know, we have our Granite State Clean Fleets grant that we opened up in the beginning of the month. We also have now just released a $280,000 round 2 of our New Hampshire Clean Diesel grant program. So now we have 2 grant opportunities out as of right now. Our round 2 of the New Hampshire Clean Diesel program is only for non-road units, which is different than what we did for round 1. So basically what we do is we score all of the applicants for round 1, and then we see how much money is left over for round 1, and we bring it over to round 2. So since there's a slightly smaller pot of money for round 2, we wanted to condense it down and have it be just for non-road, and which is also a benefit for somebody who was looking at Granite State Clean Fleets, because Granite State Clean Fleets doesn't really have a large opportunity for non-road units. It's specifically a lot of on-road units, but with some exceptions for, airport and ground support equipment and such. So I can give you guys a little bit, I can email you the information on it, but it is the same web page. So the amendment of our RFP is on our New Hampshire Clean Diesel web page.
Matt, can you email that to Adam directly, that information? We're just about to get our media blast ready.
Yeah.
We're getting it ready early this go round, so if you could send that, that'd be great.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, we're having a public hearing this evening at 6, widening Route 3. Alice Ave to Whitehall. Oh, welcome to it. Actually, it's a state's public hearing.
Anything else? All right. Butch makes motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Nobody need a second.
We don't.
Oh, that's right. All right.
We're just agreed to depart.
That's perfect. All right.
Thanks, everybody, for your time.
Sylvia, just a reminder to leave the
So,
Zoom open because it'll upload data. You can end the meeting, but just leave the Zoom open.
Right.
Dave, I just sent off the timestamps for you.
Thank you, James.
No problem.